Hi everyone, it's Laura Volpes and today I'm taking over Justine's channel with a video in which I'm going to share with you 5 different techniques to be used with alcohol inks. Before showing all the different techniques, I wanted to talk to you about these products a little bit. As you can see, they come in bottles that you can store in these tin containers, which are really handy. And you are supposed to use them on a sleek surface. And here I have some Yupo paper by Ranger. This is not actual paper, it's kind of a plastic surface and your inks will move very nicely on top of that. And by the way, the alcohol inks that I'll be using today are also by Ranger. There is a number of tools and techniques that you can use to achieve different effects. Something that is really handy is the blending solution because it will help your inks move. You can also apply your inks with these applicator felts, and also there is a blending pen that you can fill with blending solution to create effects on your backgrounds. You can use paint brushes to create paintings on your Yupo paper with your alcohol inks, and today I'm going to share with you some techniques for card making. When I work with alcohol inks, I like to wear some latex gloves so that I don't get any stains on my hands. I will be using this Distress Spritzer that is by Ranger as well, and that basically blows some air and is going to help you move your alcohol inks. If you don't have this tool, you can always use a straw, but I find this a little bit easier to use, also because you don't have any risks of getting lightheaded from blowing through the straw. The first technique that we're going to look at today is going directly on paper with your alcohol inks. The colors that I used are Pink Sherbet and Amethyst, and as you saw, I dropped them directly on my Yupo paper. And this can basically be seen as the equivalent of the wet on dry technique that we use with watercolors. I also added a little bit of blending solution afterwards so that my inks would move a little bit more easily, and I'm using the marker spritzer to move the inks even more. You can go in and add more inks and they will react in very interesting and always new ways. So pretty much you can't create the same background twice with alcohol inks, which I think is a really fun property of this medium. One thing that I forgot to mention is that you want to work on a well-ventilated area, so I have a window just in front of my desk and I keep it open while I work with alcohol inks. And here I just wanted to show you a second version of this direct-to-paper technique. But this time around, I started by adding some blending solution to my paper prior to going in with my alcohol inks. For this background, I decided to use some shades of blue and I used Cloudy Blue, Turquoise and Denim. Again, I'm using my marker spritzer to move the inks around, and this time, because we started with the blending solution first, the background is somehow a little bit softer than the one we created before. So you can choose one or the other depending on the look you're going for. For this third background, I wanted to show you a different technique, which consists in mixing your alcohol inks with the metallic mixatives. I started by adding my alcohol inks directly on the Yupo paper without adding the blending solution first, but you could do it either way for this technique. And the colors I used are Amethyst, Flamingo and Pink Sherbet. I'm going to keep working on the background until I get a result that I like, and then I can actually go ahead and come in with my rose gold mixative. You need to shake the bottle really well until you hear the sound of the little metal ball that's inside, so that the metallic component mixes well with the rest of the product, and then you can go directly on the paper. And a little goes a really long way with this product, with these mixatives. I actually added even a little bit too much, and this is why I went back in with a considerable amount of blending solution and alcohol inks so that my mixatives wouldn't take over the background. The mixatives are really fun and interesting to use. They will add some beautiful metallic finish to your backgrounds, and it's really interesting to see how differently they react with your alcohol inks and the blending solution. So it's definitely something to try out. There is a stage during the drying process of your alcohol ink pieces in which some of the parts stay a little bit sticky, and you can use that to add some beautiful foiled detail to those backgrounds, which is what I'm doing right now. I took some scrap foil, this is foil by Spellbinders, and I'm rubbing it against the areas that I can feel are still a little bit sticky. And you can see that the foil will stick to those parts, and we have some really beautiful details on the background with very little effort. Another technique that you can use with your alcohol inks is to apply them to your backgrounds using these felt applicators. The applicators can be used with your regular blending tools by Ranger. These are the ones that I use with my distress inks and oxides. And what I did here is I added the alcohol inks on the felt, and then I'm going to apply them to the paper, creating some horizontal stripes. You can see that the alcohol inks blend with each other on the paper, and I'm going to create an ombre effect starting from an intense deep red to a yellow on the top. And the colors of alcohol inks that I used are Poppyfield, Coral, Valencia and Dandelion. But actually you could skip the Coral and only go with Poppyfield, Valencia and Dandelion, because in the end the Coral just didn't show at all. You can see that you can go back and forth until you get a nice effect. Obviously, you will not get a background like what we are used to with distress inks and oxides. There will be some texture and you will see those streaks due to the motion of the sponge, but I think this is part of the charm of a background like this. I kept going back and forth with my sponges until I got a result that I liked, and I was going for a sunset background that I'll be using on one of the cards today. Make sure you work on a sleek surface like a glass mat, like I'm doing now, and you can see that it's really easy to clean your alcohol inks in that case, and for that I just used some hand sanitizer and a microfiber cloth. For the next technique, we will be using alcohol lifting, but before that we need to create a background. So I started by adding some blending solution to my Yupo paper, like I showed at the beginning of the video, and then went in with my alcohol inks in Flamingo and Pink Sherbet. I'm using my marker spritzer as I've done before to move the inks around, and I'm also adding a bit of color here and there where I feel like I want to get a little bit more coverage. Before adding the inks, I already went ahead and cut this panel down to 5 by 5.5 inches, or a little bit larger than 5.5 inches, because I wanted the panel that was originally 5 by 7 to fit in my mini Misty. And also I wanted it to be large enough to fit an A2 size card base. Once the background was completely dry, I put it down in my mini Misty and I took this beautiful stamp set by Studio Katia. This is called Lovely Blooms and it's perfect for a background like the one I'm going to create right now. I then went ahead, inked up the stamp and stamped it on my background. And then I took a microfiber cloth and I wrapped the area where I stamped my image. And you can see that what the ink did is it actually lifted off the alcohol inks that we have on the background. And we have some sort of a negative impression of the image on the background itself. I stamped the image one more time and I wrapped the background with the microfiber cloth because I wanted these flowers to really show on the background. And then because there were some areas that were still a little bit sticky, I took some gold foil and I went over those areas to add some tiny metallic details to this background. So you can see that with very little time and our alcohol inks, and with using just one beautiful background stamp, we created a gorgeous background, and all we need to do really is just to add a sentiment to this and it will be a beautiful card on its own. The last thing that I wanted to show you is that you can use your alcohol inks also to color acetate and vellum. Here I'm adding them directly on some acetate and then blending them out with some blending solution and using the marker spritzer to move the inks around. And you can use this technique, for example, to create some more interesting windows on your shaker cards. And today, later on, I will show you how you can also layer these alcohol ink backgrounds to create some nice effects on your cards. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and have a look at how the alcohol inks react on vellum. As you can see, they move pretty easily, so this is a really nice way to add color to your vellum as well. The alcohol inks did warp the vellum a little bit, but it was sufficient to hold it down with my hands and then spread the inks on the entire surface to flatten it back down. And here you can see that you can also use your mixatives to add some metallic detail to your vellum panels. So those were the 5 techniques that you can use with alcohol inks that I wanted to show you today. And here is a look at the backgrounds we created with those techniques. You can basically trim down these backgrounds to an A2 size, add a die cut or embossed sentiment, and your cards are done. I will be sharing some card examples using these beautiful backgrounds, but before that I wanted to talk to you about the Technique Resource Binder class by Justine. This is a class you can subscribe to, and at the end of it you will basically have your own binder filled with techniques that you can use on your cards, and this will be a great resource, for example, for the times where your crafty mojo has gone missing a little bit. So make sure to check that out in the description box down below, where you will also find a list of the supplies that were used today and a link to my channel in case you'd like to pay me a visit there. Alright, so it's time now to see how to put to good use those beautiful backgrounds we created. And for my first card, I decided to basically create a sunset scene using this beautiful red and yellow background and some stamps by My Favorite Things. I die cut the background using the Lawn Fawn large stitched rectangle stackables dies. I layered it with some strips of black cardstock, and then I adhered everything to a white card base that I also die cut with the large stitched rectangle stackables dies by Lawn Fawn from some white cardstock. The little girl and the bird come from the Bring Out the Sunshine stamp set by My Favorite Things, and the clouds are part of the Scene Builder stamp set also by My Favorite Things. I embossed the sentiment on some black cardstock with white embossing powder and die cut a strip around it with the Hefty Doodle strips of ease, and that finished off my first card. For the second card, I used the background that I created with the alcohol lift ink and that beautiful Lovely Bloomed stamp set by Studio Katia. I die cut the background with the largest die in the Lawn Fawn small stitched rectangle stackables dies, and I glued it on a scalloped rectangle frame that I die cut out of some white cardstock with a die by My Favorite Things. I glued everything to a black base, die cut with the Lawn Fawn large stitched rectangle stackables dies, and then for my sentiment I used this beautiful scripty hello. This is by Old and New, and the name of the die is Fancy Hello. I used the Lawn Fawn Fairy Friends to decorate the card a little bit. I colored them as well as all the images today with my Spectrum Noir markers. For my stamping, I used black alcohol marker proof ink by Spectrum Noir, and the paper is Nina cardstock, and this is true for all the images today. And then, as a finishing touch, I added some Nuvo drops in White Blizzard all over my background. My third card also features some fairies, but these ones here are from the Hefty Doodle Absolutely Awesome stamp set. I started by die cutting the purple background with the foiled detail using a die by Lawn Fawn. This is the Stitched Journaling die. I also used the same die to die cut a leftover piece of that pink background that I used for the previous card. I glued everything to my card base that I created with the Lawn Fawn Perfectly Plaid Winter pattern paper, and then I glued down my fairies and my sentiment hello that I created with the Hefty Doodle Alphabeters dies. I added a scattering of rose gold foil sequins by Studio Katia, which I am gluing down with my Nouveau Deluxe adhesive and the Pick Me Up tool. This is very useful when dealing with sequins, and this finished off my card. For my fourth card, I thought it would be fun to create a galaxy background using the panel where I had used the Mixatives. So I die cut it with the Evriel Wonky Stitches dies, and I glued it to a panel that I die cut out of some black cardstock using the Lawn Fawn large stitched rectangle stackables dies. I went ahead, stamped and colored the astronaut in the Space Explorer stamp set by My Favorite Things. I colored some planets too, and for the sentiment I used this beautiful die. This is also by My Favorite Things, and just as a reminder, you will find all the supplies that I used in the description box down below. I couldn't stop and I had to add some finishing touches to this card too. So I coated some parts with my Spectrum Noir clear overlay pen. This will add some nice shimmer to those areas. And then I coated the glass basically on the helmet of the astronaut, some of the elements on his suit, as well as the balloons that he's holding with my glossy accents, which are one of my favorite supplies to add finishing touches to cards. For my fifth and final card, I combined the backgrounds that I created on Yupo paper, on acetate and on vellum to create an ocean-themed card. I started by die cutting everything with some circle dies by Tonic Studios. I used 3 different sizes and I used those dies to die cut 1 circle out of Yupo paper, 1 out of acetate and 1 out of vellum. And then I used the Lawn Fawn stitched wave borders to die cut the acetate and the vellum. I'm basically going to layer those pieces so each circle will have a background that is circular, that is made out of Yupo paper, and then we'll have 2 wavy border, one made of acetate and one made of vellum. The images I am using are from the Lawn Fawn Seahorsing Around and Fantastic Friends stamp set. I'm gluing everything on a card base that I die cut with the Lawn Fawn large stitched rectangle stackables dies, and then I raised my heat embossed sentiment over 1 layer of foam tape to create a little bit more interest on this card. As always, I have to add some finishing touches, so I'm using a white gel pen and again a Spectrum Noir clear overlay pen, and this finished off my fifth and final card. And that's my video for today. I really hope you guys enjoyed it and I hope you learned something about alcoholing techniques. Let me know in the comments below which card and which technique were your favorites, and also don't forget to check the description box down below for a link to Justine's Technique Resource Binder class, for the list of the supplies that were used today, and for a link to my channel that you can visit if you enjoyed this video. A big thank you to Justine for having me as a guest today, and to you all for stopping by, and I wish you guys a great day.